All right, I have one more thing to check here from Tettles, who's got the most... Oh, I know what this is. Oh, I thought...
The Great Push.
Oh, yeah. Does anybody not know what this is? I remember this. Echo absolutely cheated here. I know what this is. I can tell by the thumbnail. The thumbnail with the big Echo logo. You don't? Okay. I mean, it's funny. When it was happening, it was funny.
The Great Push.
I thought it was going to be about
Sneak
Sneak
put on by
Lure.
Blizzard to be the spiritual successor to the Mythic Dungeon International. But instead of promoting speedrunning like the MDI does, the TGP tests players' ability to be able to push the highest level of dungeon. And it's a really cool format where the ability to do bleeding edge keystones is shown by the best teams in the world. The TGP, though, it wasn't always around. It's an event that began in Shadowlands, and the formation of the TGP was something that heavily interested the top players of the game. The first TGP was marred by controversy.
It was hilarious to watch.
As one team,
yeah, people don't know what it is, so let's not spoil it.
What was allowed and what was not. So today we're going to talk about the first Great Push and how Echo cheated, but won it all anyways.
This thumbnail just going into the race to world first. You know what you're doing, don't you, Peyton? Look at this one. Look at this one. We've even got Jimmy on the screenshot.
Now, let's get a little bit of backstory. So, prior to the TGP, the top teams from Europe, China, and North America,
tricksy bathwater selling swine
key leaderboard on Raider.io. But teams very rarely put in full effort to compete for the top spot. Live keys also have a significant limitation where it's not always possible to get the keystone you want. But what would happen if teams were able to compete versus one another on the tournament realm where the playing field was truly even? This is the basic premise of the TGP, where even in a competition where the prize pool was a non-serious amount compared to the MDI standards at $20,000, the teams, they decided to make it serious.
That's low as
This competition
fuck.
would also result in one of the most popular WoW esports events of all time, peaking at 30,000 viewers on Twitch and 30,000 viewers on YouTube. Now, this video is not sponsored by anybody, but it's actually sponsored by you guys, the viewers.
Fucking hell,
Thanks to
Dog
supporters
Trail.
over on my Patreon for helping make this video possible.
Jesus,
they do get some
Tettles.
cool perks like being able to watch this
Turn
video
the lights down a bit,
early
bro.
and being able to watch some of my other long-form videos early. If you're interested in that, check out my Patreon down in the description. Now, let's jump back into the TGP.
Fuck, dude. What's going on there, bro? Hold on. I want to join in. All right. All right. Are we ready to go? Guys, thank you for supporting us on the website. It's all good, dude. We're going to get back into the video right now. Easy game, easy life. Yeah, nice and bright. Oh, fuck me. That's wild.
So the first thing we need to actually establish are the rules of the TGP. The TGP was very different from the long-term WoW esports tournament, the MDI, like I said earlier. While the MDI promoted speedrunning and consistency, the Great Push promotes intense strategy.
Okay, before we go any further, I know I'm not being Mr. Interrupty. We can't have smoking that insert word pack right now become a thing in this chat. I cannot fucking deal with you constantly saying, oh, we're smoking that snow shit pack right now, baby.
Innovation and the ability to push the previously thought impossible levels. And the rules were as follows. Teams would initially have a cross-region Proving Grounds phase where teams would play for 48 hours. The dungeon in questions for the Proving Grounds were Necrotic Wake and Spires of Ascension. Teams then would push the highest key they possibly could on the tournament realm during those 48 hours. After that, the top 6 teams for cumulative dungeon score, regardless of the region, would qualify to the finals. There were tiebreakers for teams who had the same dungeon score, where the first tiebreaker criteria was that teams who had the highest dungeon would have tiebreaker criteria in their favor.
With at least 5 people.
Time. These rules actually set up for a very competitive proving ground, and something that was kind of interesting as well, the teams knew that Spires of Ascension and Necrotic Wake were not going to be dungeons in the finals, and this actually encouraged teams to stream their time trials, where we saw some absolutely insane stuff. I remember at this point in time watching Growl and Dorky, and somebody on their team discovered that they could actually snap a Marth out of the arena in Necrotic Wake, and it would just completely brick the boss, making it do 0 mechanics. Completely unrelated to this snapping, the top Chinese team at the time, Skyline, was also able to time a Necrotic Wake on a 29, where most teams were only able to do 27 or 28. And at this point in time, this was completely unexpected since China didn't really have a tendency to take WoW esports
shout out to Skyline, they're good players.
And just as a region, China has always cared a lot about pushing the highest keystone levels, but, you know, they were never really showcasing the immense amount of talent that they had on the MDI stage. Would this be a format that actually favors them was kind of a question that was looming on everybody's mind. Regardless of this, one thing about time trials is that there normally aren't any rules. During broadcast days, teams have to follow some very strict rules.
Yeah, I have no idea what the rules are of the TGP. I just thought highest key wins, but obviously it's got to do various keys.
As long as you aren't hacking the game pretty much, or getting yourself banned, pretty much anything goes, including, like you saw on screen there, breaking a Marth, like we saw from Does the Bear stream. But those were just the Proving Grounds. And out of the Proving Grounds, we ended up getting our top 6 teams that would qualify for the finals. And those were Skyline, Echo, Sheesh, Ambition, Does the Bear stream, and Yep. So we talked about the qualifiers, but the rules for the finals, like I said earlier, were a little bit different than the rules that were set for time trials. So unlike the unlimited attempts over 48 hours that the teams had during time trials, the timing was far more condensed for broadcast days. Teams instead would need to play out the remaining 6 dungeons over 3 5-hour days. In the dungeons, they would start on key level 24, and they tended to be pushed up between 26 and, let's say, 28, depending on the dungeon. Now, the team with the highest cumulative point total at the end of the weekend would win. There were some additional fringe rules, such as like an overtime period at the end of each day, where basically the admins wouldn't stop your ongoing run after 5 hours. Instead, you were just not allowed to start a new one. And this would create a pretty interesting dynamic where teams would min-max the end-of-day scenarios in order to optimize the overall time period. There's another fringe rule that involved tiebreakers between teams that had ties at the end of the weekend. All you need to know about the tiebreakers is that a team that put up the highest key would get tiebreaker preference. If all the dungeon levels were the same, it would go to time tiebreaker.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it time the difference?
Not being allowed to zone out of a dungeon in an ongoing run and other random stuff like that, but it's not really relevant to the point of this story. Now, with the rules set and the teams established, it was time to get pushing. Now, day 1 starts, and the teams are given all 6 dungeons that they're required to push up to the highest keystone level that they can go. And the teams, they discover the dungeon affixes at the exact same time as the audience, meaning the routes for specific affixes like, let's say, tyrannical, bolstering, or inspiring, were going to change the texture of the dungeons dramatically. And for those who haven't played with these,
okay, we can skip that. We know what these are.
Inspiring mob, cadence, and pathing, raid boss, potential routes per dungeon prior to going into the weekend. And teams have never played this format before, so the meta strategy for this TGP is relatively unknown.
We know what the affixes do.
At the same time, teams largely did similar
and it changes the route.
Enough. Some teams chose to go wide and do 4 dungeons on a plus 25, where some teams chose to go tall and do multiple dungeons on the much harder plus 26 keystone level. But ultimately, the way that the strategy was the same, though, was that during day 1, the other side...
Oh, God, missed a turn aside.
Off the table. And the tournament run was shut down overnight, so teams could not practice. So any tactical advantage given to the competition was a huge deal. This means that dungeons like Theater of Pain or Mists of Tyranid Scythe or whatever that had a relatively known route and dungeon cap would be the preferred dungeons to go first. And at the time, we really didn't know what was in store for The Other Side or Plaguefall, but what the audience could tell at this point in time was that the competition did not want to give any advantage to their competitors. So they'd save their routes, their tech, their potentially unique specialization picks or class picks or whatever.
You've never done a single Mythic Plus. Interesting.
And all of this resulted in Does the Bear stream ending day 1 in first place.
What is this screen, Blizzard? Oh my God. Holy fuck. What is this fucking screen? Jesus. Damn, that's a lot of information.
With 100 points, a 4-way tie at 76 points for most of the teams, and then, yep, they were in last at 75 points. And everybody was kind of gearing up for an exceptional day 2 of action where they would go and look at their routes, look at the affixes, and potentially reroute the dungeons overnight. And I'm also just going to quickly kind of summarize day 2.
Jesse has been begged to join the top MDI teams.
Based around having a rogue for Shroud,
he
while also having an elemental
like
shaman. This allowed them to get a +1 over the rest of the competition in The Other Side. Echo also had a +1 over the rest of the competition in Halls of Atonement on a 27. Now, the other side seemed far less reproducible for the other TGP teams compared to the 27 HOA. That seemed quite likely that other teams would be able to do. But regardless, by the end of day 2, the tournament is shaping up to be a hotly contested final day. And at this point, only Ambition had stepped foot into Plaguefall on a 24, but pretty much everybody knows that Plaguefall Sunday is going to be the pivotal dungeon since it should be done at the highest level. And now all of this backstory has led us to the final day.
Liquid doesn't usually... I think Liquid entered the MDI once and did extremely well. They came like second or something. Like Liquid just didn't have a team, but their players are phenomenally good. As far as I know, that's what happened. They played the last 2. Yeah, they've jumped in when they can.
Let's talk a little bit about why Plaguefall is so impactful. Plaguefall is a dungeon that theoretically can be pushed far higher than the rest. This is due to a couple of key mobs in the dungeon that do insane amounts of friendly fire damage to their allies.
Okay, this is the relevant portion of what happened here, and it was funny.
Mob number 1 in question, the Wretched Plague Boars. These guys are littered sporadically inside of trash packs in the dungeon. Basically, whenever they hit 30% HP, they would cast an ability called Plague Bomb, blow up, and then put a massive dot on trash mobs or bosses.
Am I a WoW player? I've sundered a couple of mobs.
And the Wretched Plague Boars, these were mobs that were bugged for a little while, where Echo showcased a strategy that involves cycloning and mind controlling them to not let them self-destruct, but still get the dot on the trash mobs. Whenever Echo showcased this, they showcased this on the tournament realm 7 days before the tournament started, and Blizzard slammed down a hotfix pretty quickly after Echo put up a plus 30. Gingy uploaded this to YouTube, as you can see on screen right here, but the mobs got changed. That's all you need to know. And these mobs now work as intended, kind of. And their damage can no longer be exploited beyond the limited nature in which they exist. Now, the second mob in question is the Fungalmancer. Fungalmancers have a debuff on them that can be spell stealed by Mage. The ability in question is actually called Wonder Grow, and it's a stacking 15% damage amp. This would allow Mage to do insane amounts of DPS through the dungeon if min-maxed. And you would see teams like Ambition and Skyline pretty much carrying this mob around throughout the entirety of the dungeon, even snapping it into the last boss area, and just taking this mob places where nobody thought it could go. So those are the first two mobs, and there was actually two types of Plague Boars. And this is where we get into mob 3 in question, Rigged Plague Boars. There was one type which I cited earlier that was just in the trash packs, but the rigged Plague Boars were the ones that caused all the problems and inspired this video. So there was a mini boss called Virilax Blightweaver who spawned infinite amounts of these rigged Plague Boars. She would summon 2 of these, let's say every 20 seconds or so, and these Plague Boars were typically used to kill off some map-specific trash packs. And the reason for this is fairly simple. They actually killed themselves. And you can see on screen here in this VOD from JPC that these Plague Boars, unlike the ones that you saw earlier, have a timer attached to them. When the timer expires, they blow up and they basically solo whatever trash pack you were fighting at the time.
If you're not following along, this guy spawns little mobs that only live for a certain amount of time, and then they blow up, but that damage does damage to enemies as well.
Whenever they're inside the green swirlies. And they'll also do damage to bosses, funnily enough. So,
see, for FF dudes, there's a little bomb over their head, and it's ticking down.
Both of these types of Plague Boars and Fungalmancers actually require insane amounts of finesse in order to be able to get 100% of the value out of them. But if you did, you could actually push unmatched levels inside of Plaguefall. However, as it turns out, there was a little bit more tech to the rigged Plague Boars than initially believed. And with that being the case, let's cut to 2021 me so you guys can hear the explanation for the strategy that we're going to be talking about today.
Mr. Zyro, Mr. Doa, I have some insider information about what is actually happening with the Plague Boars. So, newly released, there is a bug with misdirection. They're not, the Plague Boars aren't global combating people, it's MD.
Oh. Huh.
Oh.
Interesting.
Yeah. Apparently, if you let misdirection expire inside of a dungeon, you have permanent MD.
Mm-hmm.
What? Really?
Is it a tournament? Is it a tournament realm thing, or is that a?
It's probably a live thing.
It's
probably just a dungeon thing, man.
Huh.
Wow.
Huh.
Now, I kind of misexplained this in the video. It wasn't only if misdirection expired, like I said, but it was also if you canceled the misdirection buff off your character. And Echo, they figured out this bug with misdirection a few days earlier. And you can see Fragnet's doing this on screen here from his POV.
This is what I saw. Look how chill Jimmy is about the whole thing. Okay, if anybody doesn't know, again, FF gamers, misdirect is a spell that hunters have where you can put this buff on somebody, and then when you attack the enemy, the threat that you're generating goes to them instead of you. That's all it is. So what they're saying is that they found a bug with misdirect, because it's only temporary, where it just lasted forever. Like Shirk. Yes, very much like Shirk. Yeah.
For those people who don't know, snapping is actually a core mechanic in World of Warcraft. And it's Blizzard's way of telling you that mobs have no path available to you. They can't reach you for whatever reason. But depending on the mob type, it will either immediately teleport to you or immediately teleport you to them. But the rigged Plague Boars very notably teleported to you to make sure that the mobs don't do weird stuff inside the game, just to make sure that they always have a path to be able to hit a target. And snapping, it's a really commonly used strategy. I mean, we've seen it in many dungeons over and over again. But with this commonly used strategy and these incredibly overpowered Plague Boars, infinite misdirection, Echo got to work.
Yeah, so what you're seeing here, to agree context of what has just been said, Jimmy... Fragments, but I know him as Jimmy. Jimmy is stood here with a bugged misdirect. And this guy is spawning these bombs constantly. Jimmy's shooting them but because of the bugged misdirect, they're trying to get to the other members of the team. So in WoW, when the enemy can't find a way to get to you, it just snaps. In other words, it teleports to those people. Even though, as you can see on the map up here, the rest of the team is not even on his map. They are all the way in the rest of the dungeon. So what you're seeing on the other side of the screen is these mobs aren't supposed to be here. They're just teleporting into the final boss fight and just appearing. These bombs are literally just teleporting into the boss fight, into the trash, into everything else. It is funny. It is funny. It is definitely not intended.
I mean, we've seen it in many dungeons over and over again. But with this commonly used strategy, and these...
I would argue snapping the mobs, that's not cheating. A bugged misdirect, that is cheating and abusing that, because that is absolutely... Snapping is a feature of the game, like Tettles says. Snapping is absolutely a feature of the game. It is designed to work that way, so you can't just dodge things or just ignore things and run away. The bugged misdirect, though.
These incredibly overpowered plague boars, infinite misdirection, Echo got to work inside the dungeon. And Fragments on his hunter would run to the mini-boss and proceed to snap plague boars for nearly the entire 30-minute dungeon run.
Half an hour! What stupid is this guy? This is how dumb this is. Jimmy, notoriously, is easily one of the best DPS players in the world and has been for well over a decade. Like, an absolutely phenomenal player. And they have him stood here doing fuck all for 30 minutes.
And not only was Fragments AFK snapping mobs over and over again, but Echo ended up running 2 tanks in order to allow for threat to be more consistent. And
off they
Echo,
go.
strategy-wise...
Are we going to see them disappear? Let's see if we see them actually disappear. They're trying to figure out how to get to where they've been misdirected to.
100% all in on Plague Boars
off they go.
soloing their dungeon for them. And how did this fare? Well, no other team in real time could figure out how in the world Echo was snapping the Plague Boars. The initial theory was something related to global combat and healing threat, where feigned death was somehow to blame, but it seemed like nobody could really figure out the actual strategy. Does the bear stream even enter Plaguefall with the hunter at some point to try to figure out what in the world was going on with snapping? But nobody really could figure it out. And with the snapping strategy, Echo handily won the TGP at 157 points, where the second place teams were all at 156. Echo ended up having a +1 in Plaguefall on the level 28, and securing that for Echo basically locked up their victory. That victory is very unlikely if we didn't have what happened to the Plague Boars happen in their run. Now, the reality of this Plague Boar strategy was explained on stream by me a little bit over halfway into the day. So this means that everybody figured out what was going on at some point. The jig was kind of up from Echo's perspective. How is this a legal tactic? A lot of people were questioning. Using infinite misdirection, even for the most hardcore players, that seems a little bit sketchy in regards to strategies. Blizzard also tends to police their tournaments a bit more than, say, we saw during time trials. Now, this has a question as to why the admins did not disqualify Echo during the tourney day. So we're looking at all of this in hindsight, and there's kind of a problem in the rule set where there is a little bit of gray area for what needed to be done here. The rules are ultimately supposed to allow for Blizzard to make...
I think I know what happened here, and it is... They are my friends, but they definitely... You got to be able to call your friends out. I think they did something a little sneaky with Blizzard, if I remember right.
Judgment calls. And in this era, teams tended to ask admins for strategy clarification if they thought that there would be anything towing the line in regards to allowed versus not. And I've dug up the rule set from 2021, so we can actually look at the rules as written, because I think that's kind of important to the context for what happened here. So
it gets even stupider in terms of the comp here. In order to make this work, Echo's using 2 tanks, 1 healer. And just Gingy is the only actual damage dealer that's playing the game. Look at the damage meter. They're using 2 tanks to control everything, 1 healer, and just 1 guy DPSing because Jimmy's off AFK somewhere. Like, it's just the stupidest comp ever.
So Rule 6.2 has a provision for cheating. Letter E states that any use or attempted use by a player of any bugs or exploits in the game may result in a forfeit of the match and disqualification from the tournament.
You couldn't say it, but they're using 2 tanks, 1 healer, and 1 DPS.
Now, the first thing with letter E is that teams blatantly exploit bugs all the time. Snapping by itself could be described as a bug, but snapping is done by basically every team in a bunch of different dungeons.
Snapping's not a bug. It's unavoidable in some cases.
Could also be seen as a bug. Hell, we even saw Does the Bear stream abusing a bug in time trials to qualify for the TGP. That's not really the relevant part of this rule that we're going to be discussing today. The last line of this rule is actually the most important part, where Blizzard determines bugs and exploits is really the key to what happens. The communication to the players normally in this era said that there was a strategy that was common on live. You probably shouldn't worry about it because it was going to be allowed to be used on the tournament realm. Blizzard was really trying hard to not stunt creativity, and this was the first time that the rules were really tested by Echo, because nobody had been so blatant to try to push the line for what would be allowed and what wouldn't be allowed. From a Mythic Plus perspective, abusing class bugs and something kind of unrelated to the dungeon to completely trivialize a dungeon tends to be seen as over the line. Whereas as hardcore Mythic Plus players, it's this unsaid balance of, what is the bug involved? Is it something inside the dungeon or something related to a class or something potentially outside the dungeon? And how much time does it save you? But there was a silver bullet in Echo's favor. Kind of. So Echo actually went through and asked admins whether or not the strategy would be permitted. And they said yes. Case closed, right? Wrong. Now, this didn't come out until after the fact, but Echo lied by omission whenever they asked the admins about the strategy. They plainly asked, is snapping plague borers allowed? Which the admin's response was, sure, you're allowed to do that. But clearly the issue with this isn't the problem of snapping plague borers. It was the using of infinite misdirection, a bug that shouldn't have been in the game. And you, the viewer, you understand that the day finalizes and Echo wins, and Blizzard is in an absolute pickle trying to figure out what to do. And the high-end community is kind of split. You have people like Max, Stratnos, and JB who basically state that this is an unfortunate end to an overall very great tournament. They wish the rules were more clear, but Echo is just the smartest team. JB took a pretty bold stance and tweeted, there are no exploits in Mythic Plus, only shit that you're mad you didn't think of.
That's my guy right there. That's my fucking guy right there. That's my fucking guy right there every time. He is the goat tweeter. He is the absolute goat tweeter.
On the other hand, there were a ton of fans and competitors alike who thought that this was straight up cheating. And there was also an angry mob of people who didn't even watch the TGP. They just read the Wowhead title and got mad on behalf of, I'm not really sure, nobody maybe? But even to this day, the Chinese region still thinks that Skyline got absolutely scammed out of a win.
He is the
I
goat
also remember
tweeter.
that Ellesmere was quite mad about this series of events too. And the ultimate problem was that what was deemed to be a disqualifying level of bug or exploit was never really established. All right, so what do you remember about the Plague Boar incident?
The Plague Boar incident? God, what was that, 5 years ago? I remember everything because it was kind of insane at the time. We knew that they were going to pull out some crazy shit, but we didn't think it was going to be that crazy. We also didn't know what they were doing until basically after the tournament. That was also, I think, the same tournament as the $30,000 feather. Which is a whole separate thing, where in Sanguine Depths, there was a bug that happened to us where I taunted a feather, and during every single attempt in practice, when you taunted that feather, the feather would walk towards you when it stopped casting, and then you use that feather to reset the lantern stacks, and I taunted it and it just stood there and didn't do anything. And then it died outside of the lantern stacks. And so that's how we lost Sanguine Depths. So that I was already salty from that. And then we found out about the Plague Borers. And I remember being pretty tilted at the time because, like, obviously in the moment you're like, you know, highly competitive and like you're pissed off because it feels cheap, but then also, like, with a little bit of perspective, you know, you realize that that's just how the game works. That's how competitive play works.
Do you think that players would view the Plague Boar incident differently today? Because I think that at the time there was a lot of people that actually were in support of Echo for what they were doing.
Is that right? I'm not involved enough in the dungeon scene, but I thought, my memory is that people were pretty clear that Echo was cheating. I don't remember them being supported that much at the time, but I might be wrong on that. I'm sure Tettles is a Mythic Plus caster. It's not a clever use of game mechanics. It's clearly a problem,
I think
right?
probably,
You know?
but that's also
I can't
partially because of
remember.
a shift from Blizzard, right? Because Blizzard has shifted more towards strict rules during tournaments. You know, you had the whole disqualified from using fucking shocking disclosure. So that's a good example of like how aggressive Blizzard has shifted their stance from previously being like, whatever, you know, if it's in the game, it's in the game. And like we're the most extreme things we might act on. But in general, exploiting was much more common. And I think that that's been cracked down on by Blizzard in a multitude of ways, both in the actual game, in terms of like, you know, banning players more aggressively for pure exploiting. You know, we saw at the start of the War Within when a bunch of Method, I think, got banned, or Echo, or I don't remember. Some guild got banned a bunch for like some farm rep shit.
Oh, that was both. That was both of them actually.
Oh, that was both. Okay, yeah, I don't remember. I just remember someone got banned for it, and people were a little surprised because Blizzard hadn't really acted on that. I think that a lot of this crackdown on stuff kind of started from that Plague Boar incident, and you know, because that definitely brought to light a lot of problems. There was a lot of drama around it, and like, I think that Blizzard has shifted its stance more since then to be progressively more and more like anti-exploiting. And so I think, yeah, now it would be viewed significantly differently. It would definitely be considered like just pure exploiting and people would be pissed. But I think back then it was different because of how Blizzard had previously treated exploiting.
And my personal opinion in hindsight is that Echo cheated. I think the lying by omission is kind of the end of the conversation. And I think that Blizzard should have immediately stopped their runs halfway through the final day and disqualified all of the previous runs. The problem is the longer that Blizzard allows the day to run, the harder it actually is to walk back without serious consequences on the tournament itself. Now, I don't know this to be true, but I would actually not be shocked if Echo actually went through and explained the bug correctly from the beginning. Blizzard probably wouldn't have allowed it. But at the same time, there were kind of two problems. One, the rules were not written too clearly, but I don't think that really matters here. I think that Blizzard probably could have
I knew the guy who did
disqualified
the
them
cyanide
anyways.
bomb thing.
But the second
I've
issue
had
is that the
mixed
tournament
reports.
was allowed to continue while Echo was
Intended or
performing
not
the
intended.
strategy live on broadcast. And if you're the admins and you let Echo do the strategy, you're basically stating that it's okay. It's kind of like the old saying, it's better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission, and Echo kind of hoped that asking for forgiveness would work out. And it did. I do remember at the time I was really torn. I even pulled up like an old Titanforge podcast episode to try to see what I was even thinking at that point.
Exploit. I mean, the way Blizzard words it, because they don't know what the players are going to come up with, is they just have it at their discretion, right? As simple as that. Blizzard likes it when you're doing something very visual and cool for the stream. That tends to get more eyeballs. As long as you're not blatantly cheating. I think they should have gone down on this one and gone like, no, that's not allowed. Like, right, Tettles is right and Ellesmere is right. Is right now, if there's anything Blizzard don't like, they communicate it very quickly. And they're like, no, absolutely not. Certainly when it comes to the race to world first, it's like, no. And they'll do that with the MDI. They tell you immediately. So things have changed since here. This was the first great push. So I was assuming they were hoping for really cool things. This, not quite it. I agree with Tettles on this one. I hate lying by omission because people don't consider it lying, which really irritates me. It's like, it irritates me endlessly is lying that way. For manning a dungeon with shooting stairs, there's fuckery happening. Like, snapping things is allowed, but the permanent bug is where you draw the line. It's like, what they don't mention is like, oh, by the way, we found out a way of you permanently having misdirect. That's the problem right there. That's the problem. Not snapping mobs. That's fine. Snapping is, you obviously understand how threat works, I guess. You know, an enemy is angry at you, so it starts hitting that person. Snapping is when the enemy is trying to hit you or get to you, but it can't because of where you are, like geographically, like within a dungeon or whatever. And so it will snap in WoW. Which means it essentially just teleports to you because the game can't figure out how to get you there, how to get it there. So that's what it is. Deception by omission. I mean, a lie. I mean, the phrase is lie by omission. Lie by omission. No, I'm not surprised Tettles has put this out, honestly. I don't think there's something malicious here leaning towards the race. Tettles is, I've spoken to Tettles recently. He's doing a lot of historical looks at WoW stuff that he knows about. He knows, like I've done with legacy videos. He's doing a whole bunch of that. He's been trying to put one out, I think, every month, and he's been doing them for a while now. We were talking about one he's making after this, I assume. Yeah, he's doing some of the WoW history stuff like I've done over the years, his takes, and he certainly knows way, way more than I do about Mythic Plus, because I do not watch the MDI. I can't. I've tried, but it gets very repetitive for me very quickly. But I can watch splits all day. Have you ever exploited anything in WoW? No. Clean sheet, baby. Clean as a whistle. Clean. I mean, there's been several major points of WoW, of the devs cracking down. Not just the Saronite bombs, LFR in Cataclysm when they all got banned. You know, the guilds of all when you're in a hyper competitive environment, pushing the boundaries of what's allowed is a part of being in that environment. That is something I learned a long, long time ago. XP potions. I wouldn't use an XP potion. I don't enjoy leveling, so I just don't do it. That's where you go. Just misunderstandings. Yeah. Yeah, like I just don't do that, right? That's not what it's about at all. It's not a lie. What the fuck? Don't try and tarnish me.
After the tournament concluded,
Echo cheated,
and once
not
the
me.
results are posted, it's nearly impossible to reverse the result. But something didn't sit right with me with how Echo actually achieved the win. And I think it's really just an unfortunate situation all around. I even found an interview with HealingStat after the fact. He's the leader of the esports team, and he basically said that Echo's win was a point of controversy, which Blizzard was not super happy with. And in the future, tactics which would be deemed controversial would needed to have a VOD provided for review beforehand. And this Plague Boar incident, it started the first movement into rewriting the rules for both the MDI and the TGP. Rules that now require teams to float all potentially controversial strategies.
And the next video, how Preach cheated thousands of people and got them all banned.
By admins prior to using them during that weekend.
I'll provide the
Echo
thumbnail.
used 100% of Blizzard's grace and goodwill for this one tournament, and in the process, they used a strategy that was very controversial, and people are still mad about it to this day. But that's how Echo cheated in the...
We've got to fix this, though, Peyton. This is insane, dude. This is insane. It's like you've been descended on by heaven itself. This is wild, especially as you're wearing a white shirt. This is fucking insane, bro. We've got to fix the lighting situation. My raiding team got banned for XP potions. I was a good boy, though. In other words, you couldn't afford to buy the potions, you fucking peasant.
And ended up winning anyways. All right, that's going to conclude this video. Thank you guys all so much.
Bye! Yeah. Bye. Holy Tettles strikes again. Interesting. I do love a bit of WoW history. It tickles my nostalgia bone, just that little piece of the puzzle. I think that's it. I think that's how I react. Other than, of course, Dungeons and Dragons WoW is happening as well. Wow. I'm kind of shocked this wasn't already a thing. But D&D WoW is coming with a full rule set and all sorts of stuff. We've talked about it. I talked to a few other content friends this morning about whether or not we want to do something with this, like a dress up. We know a lot of people who like this. I don't know. I don't like D&D, which is weird, but I don't enjoy it. So I don't know. It'd be nice to maybe get Alex. Alex is a really seasoned DM. Josh Strife Hayes has done it a lot. Thinking of Team UK. Jess is very into D&D. And D&D is one of those things you find out that people you've known for years and years and years actually play D&D all the fucking time. And they're really, really good at it. And they're good at getting into character. I haven't found my way in yet. All the way through it. So... we'll see how that goes. Should we do some gaming? Because we've got drama time in like 4 hours. It's already 12 o'clock. Should we play a game? Do a WoW D&D. I'm not a coward about it. I just don't think I'm very good at it. Because I like to take the story into like an extreme silliness. And I'm not good at finding that balance with it. And then I get bored.